This is all about how to make LinkedIn ads your B2B silver bullet. One of the biggest challenges that we see specifically in business to business is you can use search channels like Google and Bing, but what happens is at some point you either run out of search queries. There aren't people searching for you or your product anymore. Any more than usual. And so in order to scale past that, you need something else. Most people look to social after that happens. With social, you've got kind of the choice between, really LinkedIn and Facebook. Now, Facebook is fantastic, but the business-to-business targeting is rough. First of all, only about like 4 to 6% of people are even putting in their company title or industry or company information. And so immediately your audience is just shrunken. It's going to be really hard to really reach a lot of your audience without muddying up your targeting and doing things like lookalikes and broad interest targeting. Whereas LinkedIn is fantastic from a scale perspective. If you're trying to show to white collar people, that probably 95% of your audience is there, and you can reach them because the targeting is so good. I want to share a little bit of a story with you here. I was consulting for a company, and I was in there talking to their sales reps after running some Google ads for them. And they came back to me and said, we've got some feedback for you, first of all, on these ads, or on the leads that we've gotten. Number one, the leads were hot. Thank you. And number two, and every time this conversation feels very similar, number two, but we had a hard time qualifying the individuals. We were talking to the CEOs, and we were talking to the proverbial janitors and everyone in between. Is there a way for us to only show our ads and only get leads from people who are maybe VP and above, maybe just decision makers? And the challenge with search is, no, you can't really do that. Anyone can type a keyword, and there's not a great way of deciding who it is who's searching a keyword. So my favorite lead qualification, what do I call it? Paradigm is called BANT, and you see it here on the screen. It stands for budget, authority, need, and timing. And what this means is each one of these is a different measure of lead quality, how ready someone is to make a purchase. So you've got ads that score timing. You're not going to be searching for a solution unless there is a need and the timing is right. So immediately all of your leads are going to come in feeling hot because the need and the timing is right. But what they lack is this ability to target by their budget. Do they have the budget to afford your product? And their authority. Is this the person who's actually going to make that decision? So how do we make sure that we're spending dollars on people who really fulfill the whole BANT paradigm here? And the reason really, or the way to do that really does come down to social. A little bit about me. I run B2 Linked, and we're an ad agency that just does LinkedIn ads. So I fell in love with LinkedIn ads about 7 years ago and decided to create a whole agency around it. So there we go. I'm just a little bit obsessed. As you can tell by my picture here and my face on the webinar, I'm a ginger. I have red hair, which I've been told means that I potentially have no soul, and that might be true. I also don't look like it, but I love endurance sports, marathons, triathlons, that kind of stuff. I've been doing SEO and PPC for about 12 years now, and I live in the state of Utah with my wife and 4 kiddos. And my company car is a go-kart. I like speed. Okay, we've talked a little bit about the different channels, but now I want to touch on the challenges that we have specifically in B2B. And those of you who've been in B2B for quite a while, these won't sound foreign to you at all. In B2B, we've got 2 really big hurdles we have to get over. Number one, we have offline conversion events. So while those in e-commerce can easily say, hey, by the end of midnight, I can total up, here's my ad spend, and here's how much I sold. Boom, I know my return on ad spend. You can do that in e-commerce, but on anything really B2B, you get a pixel that fires usually when someone fills out the initial form, but then that person then becomes a lead that goes into a CRM to a sales rep, and then that sales rep is going to communicate with that person over phone, over email that can't be tracked. Oh, and by the way, sometimes fax machine, heaven forbid. So this is just kind of what happens. We as marketers have to get access to that data. This usually happens through a CRM where sales folks are taught to be setting the proper level for leads, dispositioning those leads properly so that we as marketers can run reports against it and see what our leads are doing. We also have delayed sales cycles where, in contrast to those e-commerce marketers who by the end of midnight know what their ROAS was for the day, their return on ad spend, for us, we're going to generate a lead today that may not close for 6, 8, 12 months, 16 to 24 months if you're in the enterprise space. But what I'm telling you here is that even though you've got challenges in B2B, B2B is hot right now, and this is where all the money's at. If you look at the Fortune 1000, 72% of them are in B2B specifically. So trust me, it's where the money's at. You're in a good place. So don't ever leave B2B. Stay strong. Okay. In B2B, we've got a few different ad options for social. You've got Twitter, you've got Facebook, and you've got LinkedIn. And of course, some others like Quora that can get interesting. YouTube, that's kind of a hybrid between search and social. But I'll cover this. Twitter is really nice because the cost is low. I find it usually about 20% higher than Facebook, but that may change as Facebook gets more and more expensive. The real challenge with B2B is that the targeting on Twitter is very personal. So you pretty much can target the followers of an industry evangelist to try to get people who are interested in a certain topic, or you can target hashtags for an event and try to categorize anyone who went, let's say they went to an HR conference, everyone who used that hashtag is likely in HR and we're selling HR software to them. You can do that. It's hard to achieve scale though. When you're building these audiences, you might spend a few bucks and that can be good or bad depending on what sort of volume you need. Then you have Facebook that's quite a bit better here. They have more of a personal focus on the platform, but it's inexpensive, and they actually have some targeting for B2B that makes sense, like job title, like company name, and that's cool. I think the real challenges come into play with what I talked about earlier, where a very small proportion of people actually fill out that information on their profile. And so while 100% of your audience may be on Facebook, it's hard to reach them through the ads in a really targeted way. Then you go to LinkedIn, where the targeting is absolutely precise. The vast majority of your audience is there and you can reach them. But the big challenge is the cost. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. So we've got some serious pros with LinkedIn. Number one, we as users keep our data up to date. It's not very often when I look at someone's LinkedIn profile and I go, oh, wait, she says that she's still working there, but I know she left 6 months ago. LinkedIn is usually the second person to know about a career change after my wife. This is kind of a joke I tell. So we as users, I think we're proud of who we are professionally, and we keep our profiles up to date as soon as we make a move. And what that means for advertisers is you're not going to have a whole bunch of wasted impressions on people that are irrelevant. It's not like a list buy that when you buy it, 20% of your emails bounce and 30% of the people you call don't work there anymore. We also have robust targeting, which we'll go a little bit more into depth on. And users, when they're on LinkedIn, they're either thinking about their job or their career, which means when you're giving them an offer that augments one of those two things, it's really going to be received well, or at least it should. There's also not really a gatekeeper. If there are a lot of executives who will pass the keys to their email accounts or their Twitter accounts off to an assistant or someone to be a gatekeeper. But for LinkedIn, most people are keeping that to themselves. They view it as more personal. Also, we have the largest deal sizes that we find from LinkedIn. When you start comparing all of the different channels, you might find that Google Ads leads close the fastest, but LinkedIn always closes the largest deal sizes. I chalk this up to having the highest lead quality because of the control you have over who is actually seeing the ads. Now, LinkedIn is not all sunshine and rainbows. There are some pretty significant cons as well that you'll need to balance. Number one is the cost. Everyone talks about this when you're talking about LinkedIn ads. They're expensive, usually $6 to $9 per click. On Facebook, we see $1 to $2 clicks in B2B a lot of times, and Google Ads depends on the industry, but sometimes those clicks can get really expensive, but on average, I think they're somewhere around $1.50 a click. So LinkedIn is more expensive. We also don't have day parting, which if you're in B2B, it might make sense to only be showing ads during when your sales reps are in the office. Well, LinkedIn doesn't have that natively. You've got to use a third-party tool to do something like that. By the way, if you're interested in day parting, give me a shout. I'm going to share my email address here at the end. We're actually developing a day parting tool that I might be able to use a beta tester for. Okay, so next, there's no device level bidding. So pretty much on every other network, I can choose the ads I want to show to you if you're on a mobile versus a desktop versus on a tablet. LinkedIn doesn't have that. I just know that 80% of my traffic is going to come from mobile, and I can't direct them to a different page. There's also this concept of relevancy score on LinkedIn. It's the same as relevance score on Facebook or quality score on Google. And what it is it's a relative score of how much money you make for the platform. So if your ads get clicked on twice as much as your competitor, the network looks at that and goes, oh, AJ deserves a higher relevancy score because when we show his ads, we make money twice as often. So if you have a high relevancy score, you can bid less and still fill your budget. If you have a low relevancy score, your ads will essentially shut off. Now, LinkedIn isn't going to tell you your score outright, while the other networks will. So you pretty much just have to feel it out and see. If your ads shut off, you know you're low. If your ads are doing great, you're probably high. So because LinkedIn ads is expensive and because the targeting is what it is around business to business or around business professionals, oh, great. I'm getting calendar reminders for this exact thing. Because LinkedIn is more expensive, it means that they've priced some people out of the market. So what I want to share with you here are the types of companies that it actually makes sense to do LinkedIn ads with, so that if you're not a good fit here, feel free to stick around for the whole webinar, but I want to save you money. I want to make sure that you're not going to spend money on a platform that isn't going to work for you. So number one, if you're in business to business, doesn't matter whether it's products or services, and you've got a high lifetime value or a high deal size, and I classify that as $15,000 or more, then LinkedIn ads is going to work for you 100% of the time. It's a high enough lifetime value that you can make up for high costs per click of entry. Next is recruiting. Recruiting is actually a really significant industry on LinkedIn. As you might expect, it kind of came from being a job portal, but employees are worth a lot to companies, and so it quite easily fits into this lifetime value of about 15K. So of course, when you hire an employee, it's not like it costs you 15K, but there's a pretty high opportunity cost that's well over 15K, so it fits here into the model. And then finally, we've got education. So if you're in like a recruiting for a PhD or an MBA program, then you can target really well on LinkedIn around someone's level of education, and that's going to get you the type of people that you want to bring in. So for instance, you might say, I want to target people who have a bachelor's degree but no master's or doctorate level, who studied English. And you can say they would be great for our MBA program, for instance. Okay, so anytime that you're doing anything with social, I want you to remember an acronym, and it's AMMO. And so you can say to yourself, when I'm going to social, I need to bring my ammo. It stands for your audience, your message, and your offer. Now, your audience is pretty much down to the targeting. Do you know who you're trying to sell to, and can you identify them properly? LinkedIn makes this really easy because their targeting is so detailed. We'll get into that here in a few slides. Your message pretty much breaks down into what's the ad format you're going to use, what's the image you're going to use, what are you going to say, your ad copy itself. And that's pretty simple. If you know what your offer is, what you're driving traffic to, your message is just going to be a distillation of whatever that offer is down into just a sentence or two to advertise it. So I don't put a whole lot of emphasis on message. What I do put the emphasis on is your offer. If you can imagine, if someone is on LinkedIn or any other social network, they're not there to do business with a vendor. They're not surfing with their wallet open. So you've got to give them something that makes it worth their while to stop what they're doing and come and click and interact with you. If you put up an ad that just says, here's what we do, talk to our high pressure sales rep over here, no one will click that ad, and it will get a poor relevancy score and it will just shut off. So we will talk about offers a little bit more in depth, but let's start first with message, and we'll talk about the different ad formats you can use on LinkedIn. So the very first ad unit LinkedIn had was back in 2007, the end of 2007, and it was called text ads. They really haven't changed much since. They're very simple. And these are the cheapest ad unit on LinkedIn. You can bid all the way down to $2 per click and still get traffic. Most are probably paying somewhere between about $3 and $5. They show only on desktop computers, and that's helpful if you have maybe a poor mobile experience. Maybe you're asking for so many fields that it's hard for mobile devices to fill them out. And what I want to point out here is that because these look like ads and they're off to the side, people are quite banner blind to them. This statistic you see, that 0.03% click-through rate, is good. To put that in perspective, that's 3 people clicking out of every 10,000 impressions. Just let that sink in. That means that these are a really good ad unit if you have a large target audience. If you are really hyper targeting and you're getting down to a very small group, there may still be value in running these because you get a ton of free, pretty much, impressions, but they don't get clicked on, they don't get seen a whole lot. So keep that in mind. I recommend text ads for probably about 15% of advertisers. So then in 2013, the next ad unit they gave us was sponsored content. Now this is what I call LinkedIn's Halo ad unit. These, I recommend about 95% of advertisers start here. It appears right in the user's news feed with a big, beautiful image that takes up the entire width of their tablet or their phone screen. If they're on desktop, it's 1200 pixels wide. You can see by the click-through rate here, the click-through rate is at least 10 to 15 times higher than a text ad. So that means if you're going after a very specific type of audience, you can actually spend some money here. You can actually drive real meaningful traffic here. The stat here says 70 plus mobile users. This is actually closer to 80% now, as more and more people are using the LinkedIn app. And that's just what we see in social. Everyone on social is using an app. These work really, really well for content offers. And we'll talk a lot more about content offers, but they work pretty well for about anything, but they were built for, here's a piece of content, here's a little tease about what you're gonna see when you get there. It works really well for gated content. Okay, and then the third ad unit we got access to, this is about 2 years ago, we got sponsored INMAIL. So, as opposed to the other ad units we just talked about, sponsored INMAIL, or those ones we paid by the click, sponsored INMAIL is a different model. You pay per recipient, you pay per send. The costs look pretty low here. You're probably gonna pay somewhere between about 35 and 85 cents per person that this lands in their LinkedIn inbox. Then you start doing the math to try to figure out, okay, I pay less per send, but how many people are going to see it? How many are going to open it? How many are going to click on it? And so what you plan on here is about a 50% open rate and about a 4% click-through rate. And if you do the math, you're going to probably end up somewhere between about $12 and $22 cost per click is what we see on average. So don't be distracted by the price looking low. This is actually LinkedIn's most expensive ad format. And because of that, you should use it judiciously. Because it feels like an email, it should feel like a personal invitation. So as you're crafting this, make sure that you're picturing when you're writing it, does this feel like a personal invitation? If it does, you're on the right track. If you're essentially saying, here's a white paper that we came out with, download it now, it's going to feel like spam email. By the time someone makes the decision whether or not this is a nice personal invitation or a spam email, you've already paid for it. So it's definitely in your best interest to make it feel personal so that they will want to actually open it and click on it. That means you want that open rate to be high. If you can get into the 60, 70% open rates, you're doing great. And you do that by having a really good subject line. So think through that subject line. That's the first hurdle you've got to get over in getting people to engage with this. And then second, your click-through rate is going to tell you if people are actually liking what your message says. So if you've got a 5, 6, 7% click-through rate, you're doing great. If you've got a 1 or a 2%, make sure you go back and take a look at your copy. These come from a personal profile. So if you're sending this out on behalf of your company, think through who at your organization it would make sense to actually come from. If it comes from someone who has sales in their title, maybe someone's going to feel like they're fresh meat on the marketplace, and they may not want to interact with a sales rep. Maybe if it comes from the CEO, they'll go, the CEO, that's not believable that they would actually reach out to me. I'm a nobody. I can't imagine he would take his time doing this marketing activity. But maybe you find someone in like customer support or customer success, some kind of really believable, hey, this person might actually have reason to reach out to me personally. Okay, LinkedIn just last week actually came out with a new ad unit, an ad format called dynamic ads. Now this is not new. We've had access to these for a long time, but you had to go directly to your LinkedIn sales rep and make at least a $25,000 commitment to them to use. What they do is they take your image, your profile picture, and they stick it into the ad. Because of that, I've had many people come to me and say, hey, like, how did that company put my picture in their ad? That's a little bit creepy. So I call them LinkedIn's creepiest ad unit. They are generally not as effective on a cost per click or a cost per lead basis as sponsored content, but the one cool thing you can do with them is do follower campaigns. So if you want to get a lot of new followers for your company page, dynamic ads is what you want to use for that. I haven't created a slide for this one yet. We're still playing with the ad unit quite a bit to see if I can come out with best practices. But just be aware, when you go to create a campaign right now, you will see that ability, and you can be creepy. Okay, LinkedIn has something called Leadgen forms. They're following Facebook's footsteps. Facebook had this probably about 5 years ago, where instead of sending someone to a landing page off of the network, you could have a little drawer pop down and a form that says, fill out your information here. You don't have to leave the social experience, and you'll become a lead. This can be attached to 2 different types of ad formats, either sponsored content or sponsored INMAIL. So if you're using one of those 2, you can try this out. Some really cool things about Leadgen forms: they can usually give you a conversion rate that's much higher than what you would have had on a landing page, because the experience is so much more seamless. You're not waiting for a page to load. You're not reliant on what if this landing page has a poor conversion rate. You don't have to worry about that. All of that's done within. So oftentimes we'll see 10 to 30% higher conversion rates if you're using these forms, which can be great if you really just want the lowest cost per form fill. The challenge here is that traffic never hit your website. So if you're doing retargeting through like Google Ads and Facebook custom audiences, that traffic never hits your website, so you can't do anything more with that. That's kind of unfortunate, because I think one of the most powerful parts about LinkedIn is getting the right people to your site, and then you can retarget them through other more pervasive networks. So that makes me sad. The other thing that makes me sad about these is, because that traffic doesn't hit your website, you can't have analytics track them. So you're not putting UTM parameters on these and being able to see that interaction on your website, which makes sense. These are a little janky to set up when you're going through the process of creating an ad and then you create a lead form. You'll probably have a lot of questions. It's just kind of janky on the back end. That also goes with getting your leads out. When someone actually submits a lead form, that lead is put in an Excel sheet or a CSV on the back end of LinkedIn, and then you have to go and download it manually when you want it. It's just like Facebook was for the first 3 years. However, they do have some integration partners that will ease this burden for you a little bit. So if you use Eloqua, Marketo, LiveRamp, and actually Salesforce is a brand new partner here, you can have an integration that sends that lead directly into those systems. And if you still want that interaction, but you're not using one of these, quite frankly, more enterprise level software, then you can use Zapier. So Zapier has a plugin that's about $20 per month to ship it into whatever Zapier plugs into. So if you're using a CRM that's not supported, you can still do it for $20 a month. Okay, LinkedIn also gave us video ads that only work inside of sponsored content. Some things that you should know about video ads is, unlike YouTube and Facebook, you cannot upload a .srt file or a subtitles file. And so because of that, you will want to hard code your subtitles in the video. And the reason why is because, like many other platforms, your videos are going to play muted. And you're going to pay for the people who view your video, and that's someone who sticks around for at least 3 seconds. So chances are you're going to pay for most people who see the video. So your goal is to get them to stick around and get the message as long as possible. So make sure you've got subtitles there to grab their attention so that they'll want to actually listen to the sound. There's no retargeting yet based on this. On YouTube and on Facebook, you can say, hey, once someone's watched 25% of my video, then show them the next one. We can't do that yet on LinkedIn. And be aware that the costs, again, it's kind of LinkedIn's MO, are pretty high. Your base, usually the floor that you can bid at is 6 cents per 3-second view. And in comparison, you're usually going to pay 1 to 2 cents per 3-second view on Facebook. So make sure you've got a really solid video strategy here. Okay, the targeting, this is my favorite part about LinkedIn. Basically, everyone who comes to me and says, hey, we want to advertise on LinkedIn, I'm like, cool, tell me who your audience is, and let's figure out ways to target them. So you can target by job title, their department, which they call job function, their level of seniority, individual skills they have on their profile, or groups that they're members of. You can also have the company. So what industry are they in, what company size, and we've got some really cool stuff for actually targeting the individual companies you want to go after, or excluding certain companies. Pretty cool there. And of course, we talked about education. You've got the normal demographic stuff. What I want to point your eyes towards here is the combinations and exclusions. Between each of these sections, so if you add job seniority to department or job function, you're making your audience more specific. You're saying they have to have this job function and they have to have this level of seniority, and you're making your audience more targeted. When you use exclusions, you're just skimming off the top. You're saying, hey, if you're a competitor, I'm going to list you by name here, and I want you to be excluded from my audience no matter what, even if you would normally fit. And that way you can keep flying under the radar, and your competitors have no idea that you are advertising awesomely on LinkedIn. So when you come to me to talk about who your audience is, immediately I'm putting them into 2 different buckets. I want to understand, number 1, who the individual is, and number 2, I want to understand what type of organization that individual is at. And the reason why this is important is if you came to me and you said, hey, we sell to CFOs, I'm going to say, great, would you still, would a CFO at a 2-person company still be interested in your product? Would they still have good use for you? And would they be able to afford your product or service? And if that answer is no, then you've got to put those 2 together. You find the CFO at the company with, let's say, 200 or more employees, or 500 or more employees, maybe even in a certain geography or industry. So the way that we target the individuals is 4 separate ways. We have job title, groups that they're members of with a seniority. So you can say if someone is a member of marketing groups and they have a C-level seniority, they're probably a CMO. So you can layer that. Job function, which is their department with seniority, and skills they have plus seniority. So again, if you're trying to target a CMO, you can layer on marketing skills with CXO level seniority, and you can get a CMO. So this is 4 separate ways to target seemingly the same audience. And what's so cool here is that each of these types of targeting are going to miss some people and are going to maybe be more broad in other ways. So if you're using all 4 of these separately, let's say you're targeting CMOs, so you've got a titles, a groups, a job function, and a skills campaign all competing. At some point, you'll be able to say, hey, it looks like my job function campaign has the lowest cost per click, which is bringing in the lowest cost per lead. That's interesting. Or maybe our groups campaign has the lowest volume, but wow, the conversion rate is so much higher there. These are learnings that you can have because you broke them out. Okay. Here's a little bit of a different flavor that you'll see from the types of targeting. So job title, when you put together a job title on LinkedIn, it is a free form field, meaning you can write whatever you want. You can get cutesy as an executive and say, I'm the chief trash can emptier in the office. And what that means is LinkedIn's got to look at that job title and classify you into buckets. The challenge is that LinkedIn probably doesn't understand more than about 40% of the job titles that are on the platform. So if you're only doing job title targeting, your ability to reach your whole audience is going to be stunted a little bit because it's so precise and your volume is going to be low. And because job title is probably the first place that marketers think to look in, that means competition goes high. So available inventory low and competition high means you're going to pay more for a job title campaign click. Versus a job function. Job function is by far the most broad. So you can say, if you are in a marketing department and you have a seniority of manager or above, then we want you. This is the most broad type of targeting, and that means it's going to get you the highest amount of volume, and you're probably going to pay the least because it's less competitive. Then you have skills and groups that kind of fall in between. Skills are quite broad because each member can have 50 of them. Groups could be broad because each member can join up to 50 groups, but most don't. Okay, so when we were talking about offers, I mentioned that there's certain types of offers that might turn people off. Like here, talk to our sales rep. What I want to show you here is there are levels of interaction that people feel comfortable with because they provide less friction to them, and levels that feel like they're higher friction or too much. So you've got something at the bottom that's like, here, try a trial of our software or take a demo, talk to a sales rep. That's ultra high friction. And so people are probably not willing to do it. And when they do, it's at really low rates, meaning your cost per lead is going to be really high here, or your ads are just going to shut off. On the opposite side of the spectrum, you have your blog posts. Sending someone to a blog post or an infographic that is going to feel really, really low friction. You're saying, hey, if you get a paragraph into my blog post and you decide it sucks, you can leave. Like, no one's going to chase you down or hound you at all. Because those, you're still going to pay $6 to $9 a click with LinkedIn. And because these blog posts and infographics are not going to have a really high conversion rate, because that content tends not to, you're going to have a really, really high cost per lead. So what I'm recommending is start right in the fat middle here of the guides, white papers, checklists, cheat sheets, ebooks, webinars, a free in-person event, these types of things where you're saying, I'm going to add value, I'm going to teach you something, I'm going to solve a pain point for you or solve a major curiosity for you. And in exchange, we're asking for your email address or some amount of personal information so that we can follow up, start a conversation, and have a relationship. So this is where you want to start. Make sure that your offer does that. It either solves a major pain point or at least promises to, and or solves a major curiosity. Okay, when you're talking about testing, there are some things you can test that make minimal difference. And if you think of it in terms of a lever, you're going to have little things that are like a little lever. Like, I can sit there and play with ad copy and images all day, and I might be able to sway performance by 5 to 15%. So that little lever, maybe I can push on it and move 1 or 2 pounds. Then you have things at the other end of the spectrum, like the sales enablement role of going and sitting down with your sales reps and letting them know, here's who we're targeting. This is the type of content we're targeting them with. Here's what the landing page looks like. Here's what they're expecting when they hit the CRM and they now appear as a record for you to follow up with. This is the process they went through. You can help put the sales rep in the right mindset, and then they can close 10 to 20x the deals. So that's where your lever would be like 5 miles long, and you can move tens of thousands of pounds with the same amount of pressure. Okay, retargeting on LinkedIn is glorious because as opposed to search, where the only thing you know about your retargeting audience is about what keyword they typed or what landing page they visited, as opposed to that, on LinkedIn, we can say, hey, we're sending a whole bunch of traffic to our website. We know everyone who has this UTM parameter in their URL is a CMO because we were able to target that way. So now you build a whole retargeting audience around CMOs specifically, and you don't have to guess about what content's going to be interesting. You know they're a CMO, you know what issues they have, what keeps them up at night, and so you can continue making content for them. LinkedIn does have retargeting, but it's not nearly as powerful as Google or Facebook. So my recommendation is send the traffic from LinkedIn. You're going to pay a premium for them, but you know who they are. You know that they're exactly the right people. And then use AdWords and Facebook to follow them around the internet and stay top of mind. I keep saying AdWords. Google Ads is going to show those ads all the way across the Google Display Network, which is pretty much the whole web. And Facebook's going to show across Facebook and Instagram, where they're spending the majority of their social time. Okay, I'm going to race a little bit through the last few contents because I want to make sure that we're going to have ample time for your Q&A, because I see lots of really good questions coming through here. LinkedIn has new matched audiences, and we call them new, but they're about a year and a half old now. So let's start at retargeting. I mentioned that LinkedIn has retargeting, but it's not very powerful. It's cookie based, so that means iOS devices or other browsers who don't carry a cookie aren't going to be a part of your audience. You've got to have a minimum of 300 audience size. And I think one of the biggest challenges with LinkedIn is that people don't spend a lot of time there like they do on other networks. So the whole goal of retargeting is to stay top of mind. It's hard to stay top of mind when someone sees your ad, once a week or once every couple weeks until the cookie expires 90 days later. So then we have what gets a lot more exciting, which is email match. Now, email match we've had on other platforms for quite a while. We've had on Twitter and Facebook for 4 or 5 years. On Google, we've had it for 3-ish years. And this is where you can upload a list of email addresses specifically to show ads to. And that's pretty cool. But what gets me really excited is the one that no one else has, which is company match. This is where you can take a list of up to 300,000 company names, upload them to LinkedIn, and have LinkedIn process, and then you can then either target or exclude based on those audiences. You can do company targeting with Facebook. We just got it back here a few weeks ago, but you have to type them in manually, and there's a 5,000 limit. Whereas LinkedIn, you're going to reach probably 95% of the people who are part of your audience by using this type of targeting. Okay, if you are looking to advertise for the first time, I want to give you a free offer, and it's pretty much no strings attached. So if you go to b2linked.com/checklist, you can download, it's the same 8-point onboarding checklist that our own team uses when we onboard a new client. It's the checklist of what you need. You need to make sure you have a company page in order to advertise, and you open a new account. Links for all that stuff is going to be there. Like I said, same process that we go through. I just want you guys to have it. It will ask for your first name and email address, but if you don't tick that box that says, I want B2Linked to reach out to me, you'll never hear from us ever again. This is purely to help you out. Okay, now we're to the Q&A portion, and I do have your chat open, so I'm excited to go through and actually answer your questions. So I'm going to try scrolling back up to the top, and we'll start from the beginning, and we'll try to cruise through these. All right, number one. I'm still looking at all of your cities. Let's see. It says, will you cover how to do an ABM, account-based marketing campaign for B2B on LinkedIn? ABM is interesting because we can target by company name. You can either do that up to 100 companies at a time by keying them in individually, or you can do like we showed on this previous slide here, of uploading a list of up to 300,000 companies. So you can absolutely target or exclude by company name, and this is what we usually refer to as an ABM campaign or account-based marketing on LinkedIn. What you do with it after that is really, I think, where the cool stuff gets into. So this is a little bit of a teaser for the actual CXL course. So if you take the course that has 4 classes, we're going to go a lot deeper into the hacks, the tips, the tricks on how to do really cool stuff with ABM. So make sure you sign up for the course and stay tuned for that. Okay, next. So how do you calculate the cost per click that really fits into lifetime value? The way that we've done that, we've worked with hundreds of different accounts and spent over $110 million on the platform, and we haven't found a strict formula, but what we know is you're going to pay $6 to $9 a click. So based off of a 10 to 20% conversion rate, you're going to have a $35 to $85 cost per conversion, and then that's going to turn into an MQL at a given rate. We'll call it a 50% rate, and then that's going to qualify to an SQL or sales qualified lead at a rate of about 50%. You just keep following that down the funnel, and on average, based off of the cost per click, that you're probably going to close deals in $2,000 to $3,000 in ad spend. And what that means is, at some point you're going to want to see a significant return on your investment. If you're going to pay $2,000 or $3,000 to land a $15,000 client, then you're going to stick around. This is going to be a good platform for you. If you're going to pay $14,000 for a new customer and you're only going to make $15,000 from them, that's not a scalable strategy. Okay. Oh, and someone actually already answered that question there in there. So sorry for wasting your time, but hopefully I added a little bit more color. Can you expand on targeting for specific companies, especially for retargeting? So LinkedIn calls it retargeting when they do their account-based marketing, but you don't have to have shown the ad to someone before in order to target them by company. So hopefully we covered that a little bit more in depth when we were talking about ABM. Get a list of the specific companies together that you want to reach. Realize that you have to have a pretty large list to really spend a lot of money. So if your sales team gives you, hey, here's our 200 top accounts, realize you're probably not going to spend thousands of dollars a month targeting that list. It'll probably be a little bit more specific. Okay. Scrolling here. What methods have worked the best to drive demos? Would you do website retargeting from your pricing page? That's website retargeting from your pricing page actually makes a lot of sense. So I would highly recommend that. I would also say your converters. So if someone has downloaded a white paper or a checklist or joined a webinar from you, and you've got their email address, you can either try to add a second step in there where you're giving them a piece of content that's maybe a little bit more involved, or you can shoot right for the demo from there. And you'll have to test and see, are people jumping that gap for you? So I would only show demos on retargeting campaigns. That can be maybe all the people who have already downloaded your asset. And you can do that by setting your retargeting audiences across Google and Facebook to say anyone who has landed on one of my thank you pages for content, then I want to show them a demo ad. But yeah, you wouldn't want to start out with a demo just because you have to assume every person who sees your ads on a social network that isn't a retargeting campaign, this is their first interaction with you ever. Okay, what percentage of budget do you spend on lead generation campaigns versus traffic campaigns? I will say 99.9% of my budget goes towards lead generation campaigns. I believe LinkedIn is too expensive to try to just drive traffic. If I'm sending someone to a blog post or an infographic, I know my cost per lead is going to be so high. And of course, we're an agency. That means our client at some point is going to hold us accountable for, hey, our cost per lead is $1,200. Why is that? Well, it's because we had some traffic just going to your blog posts that don't have a strong call to action on them. So I would say save traffic campaigns for things like Google Display Network and Facebook ads, Twitter ads, but come to LinkedIn just for the lead generation. Unless you're a Fortune 500 who just has tons and tons of money to blow, then that's the 0.1% of our budget that goes towards just traffic. Okay, do you use any other ad networks that offer B2B targeting options, such as Outbrain, which now offers job title and other targeting? My background is pretty heavy in B2B with a lot of different channels. I haven't used Outbrain since they've had job title targeting, but I've used things like Terminus. I've used Sysomos has a cool plugin that allows you to target job title on Twitter. So I've gotten a chance to use a lot of those. I am a proponent of any way in B2B we can use to reach our audience. If that means that you steal some of your LinkedIn ads budget to push to something like that, then even though I'm a LinkedIn ads guy, I highly approve. So do whatever is going to make the most sense. Anytime I can get job title targeting anywhere, I want to play with it. So thanks for actually educating me on that one. For retargeting with Google ads, do you use the same language that you use in LinkedIn, or are they different ads? Yeah, I'm a big fan of consistency. So if I have a retargeting campaign on LinkedIn, I'm going to have the same general message and the same assets that I'm pushing people to across Google ads and Facebook ads. And that means, the user doesn't see these as different channels. The user sees that they're seeing content by you around the web. So if they see something on Facebook, I want them seeing a consistent message on Google as well. How do you address the challenge of importing custom lists into LinkedIn when you only have their company emails? Most people use their personal email for setting up their LinkedIn profile. Jocelyn, this is absolutely correct. Most people, when they sign up for any social platform, are using a personal email address. Big challenge when you're doing this on Facebook that only 5 to 15% of your your emails are going to match when they're professional, just because people don't ever use their professional email with Facebook. On LinkedIn, it's a little bit better because LinkedIn actually has record of a lot of your different addresses. So you log in with your personal, which means anyone who's matching by personal addresses is going to have a really high match rate. But anytime someone sends a LinkedIn connection request to your work address and you hit accept, or you go to actually check out that person's profile, it's going to take their company address and associate it as well. So you may not have 100% match rate. You might not even have 50% match rate on company name uploads, but it should still be a lot better than you can get anywhere else. So instead of just using company name targeting, just email targeting, I like to use company name instead because it's a lot more broad. And so if you know you're wanting to target a sales rep at a certain company that you have their email address for, how about you just target all of the sales reps at that list of companies? Okay. And what did I mean when I said that LinkedIn lead generation forms have poor tracking? What I mean is when you submit a lead through LinkedIn, it goes to a spreadsheet on the back end, and you don't have UTM parameters that you can pass into a CRM and know exactly from which campaign and which ad fueled that, which is unfortunate because all the other advertising that we do, we're putting a unique tracking parameter into every single ad, and it's really nice to be able to say when a deal closes, hey, what was the exact ad that drove that deal? You can know when you're doing that. Lead gen forms, it gets muddied a little bit. Okay, should I use lead forms or send people to a ClickFunnels leads pages landing page? This one is a really good one because probably about a third of our clients use lead gen forms alone, and about 2/3 are still sending people to landing pages. So it really comes down to what you need. If you need your conversion rate to be as high as possible, then lead gen forms are probably going to be the way to go, especially if you can get it set up on the back end to properly pass that the leads into whatever system you're using so you can follow up quickly. Realize that any platform that you're using lead gen forms on, your sales team will probably complain a little bit more about the quality. You've made it so easy for people to submit the form and become a lead that a lot of times the sales team will come back and say, hey, we're calling these people or we're emailing them, and they don't actually remember filling out a form. They feel like this is spam. So this happens when you've made it so easy for them. Even more so with LinkedIn, where on a lot of these forms, LinkedIn has an autofill with LinkedIn button that when someone clicks it, it takes their profile information and fills up the form for them. So they said, oh, this looks interesting to me. They click twice, and now they've submitted a lead. And tomorrow, if your sales rep contacts them, they might not actually remember doing that. Okay. Oh, yeah, quality was going to be follow-up question. Nice work, Jared. Okay, I'm going to scroll up again here a little bit and see if I have any that, and feel free to keep them coming. We've got about 5 more minutes, and I'm going to try to continue covering all of your questions however possible. Okay. Okay. Vance says you can set up a Marketo program with lead gen forms to track what campaigns yielded the most results. It would need to be linked to Salesforce. That's absolutely true. If you're using one of those enterprise platforms, LinkedIn has made it pretty easy to get your data in there with an integration. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to get set up, and sometimes it's a little bit buggy, but it's probably going to work pretty well. So if I were you, I would take a lead gen form version of your campaign and a landing page version of your campaign and run them side by side as an A/B test to feel what makes more sense. If the leads are coming across to your sales reps and they view them as having lower amounts of quality, then you may say, it's not worth it for our sales reps to think that the leads we're sending them are of low quality. So maybe we're okay taking a little bit of a hit on a cost per lead to send someone to our landing page. Or maybe you say our retargeting program is absolutely invaluable to us, and because of that, we want to make sure all of the traffic hits our landing page. That's your prerogative too. I would say definitely test it. All right. Oh, a link to the course. Brian, if you're listening right now, if you could throw a link into the chat for everyone for a link to the course, that would be awesome. Because I think I would probably bore you all by having you look at the top of my balding head while I try to search for it, but the course is active and alive, and you can go and sign up for it now. Okay, Jocelyn asks, how do you set up UTM parameters to find out the exact ad that caused the conversion for your LinkedIn campaign? I love this question. What this is every single ad that you publish, if you have a specific ad parameter that is unique to every single ad, that means if you pass that into your CRM and then when the lead closes, you know that ad parameter was associated with it. That tells you exactly that did it. If you course, the fourth class is going to talk really heavily about the analytics and closing the loop. And so if you want to hear more of that, I don't want to sound sales pitchy, but definitely sign up for the course because I gave away my very best stuff there. But that's basically how you do it. Make sure everything is unique to every single ad, and then it gets passed through, and then you can identify it. Cool. All right. Okay, and Vince asks, can I retarget just 500 people? Yes, on LinkedIn, you can target any audience down to 300 people even. So if you have a list that's smaller than that, you've got to broaden it. But if you've got a list larger than that, then yeah, you can show retargeting ads. Be aware that because of match rates, if you say, hey, I've got an email list of 500 people, then I want to upload this email list. It's possible because of if you have a 3/5 match rate that you may land somewhere in the 280 to 330 range. So depending on that, you may or may not have an audience large enough to target. All right. Oh, Kyle, thanks so much for throwing the link in there. Okay. When you mentioned LTV, are you referring to lifetime revenue or lifetime profit? Andy, really good question, and this totally depends on your level of comfort. We have plenty of clients who base it off of their revenue, and we have plenty of clients who base it off of pure profit. Totally depends on what you take into account. What we've found, I kind of base my $15,000 minimum lifetime value off of revenue. And I've found that if I base that off of revenue, most companies are efficient enough with their overhead that there's still a lot of room for profit, but take it for whatever your level of risk tolerance is. Okay. What metrics do you use for types of campaigns? Okay, really good one, Vance. The metrics that I care about are the funnel conversion metrics. What I mean by that is I'm looking initially at click-through rates. If I launch ads and my click-through rate is higher than benchmark, then I know that my ads are hitting the right audience and they're saying the right things. And that's a really good signal to me. A high click-through rate does not signal a higher conversion rate. There's very little consistency between those, but it's my first signal that when I launch something, let's say I'm 2 or 3 days in, if I have good click-through rates, I know I'm on the right track. Then I want to look at my initial funnel conversion rate. So I've gotten them to my landing page or to my offer, and I want to see if they're converting properly. If I've got a content asset like a webinar or a white paper, then I know that's going to have somewhere between an 8 and a 20% conversion rate. If I've got a 25% conversion rate, I know I'm looking good. If I have a 4% conversion rate, I know there's something seriously wrong. So that's what I'm looking at. Every stage all the way down from impression to sale, I've got a rate that tells me how I'm doing, and I can compare that against benchmark or other channels. Benchmarks very quickly, I've got to end here, but benchmarks very quickly on sponsored content, a 0.35% click-through rate is average. So if you're doing better than that, you're doing great. If your conversion rate is higher than about 20%, you're doing awesome. If it's lower than 8%, I think you've probably got a problem or need to retool that. Okay, I threw my personal email address up here, so feel free to reach out to me with any questions that we weren't able to get through here. And thank you all so much for joining, and I hope to see you in the course. Have a fantastic Friday. Hopefully your weekend hasn't started yet, but enjoy a fun weekend, and we'll talk to you here later. Thanks.